How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf 11? Daf 11. Masechta Horayos. This Masechta has been something else, huh? What do you guys say? Anyways, on today's Daf, we begin with discussing more details about kohen, moshiach, and nasi. I'm sure you all can't wait. So we're going to kind of, would I say even maybe wrap up some details? Possibly, but yeah, more details about kohen, moshiach, and nasi. We talked a little bit about Moomar. Now, we had a sugya a little bit about Moomar in Masechta Avodah Zarah and Daf Chof Vav, I think. And we've seen it in other places as well, Masechta Sanhedrin. But we're gonna have a brief discussion about a Moomar, somebody who does Averis, somebody who doesn't, halacha doesn't concern them as much as I guess it should. And finally, Shemen Hamishkhah. We get to a new Mishnah which discusses the kohen moshiach and the Shemen Hamishkhah, and then we get into a discussion about Shemen Hamishkhah, which will continue on to tomorrow's daf as well. So, friends, we have an interesting daf here ahead of us. I hope that you enjoy. Friends, we are going to begin on daf Yud Aleph, Amid Aleph, about 6 or 8 lines or so. Let's see, 2, 4, 6, 7 lines into the daf on daf Yud Aleph Amid Aleph. Tonu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Me'ama Oretz, so this pasuk is by a korban chatas, a regular korban chatas. And by regular korban chatas, it says Me'ama Oretz, from the people. Prat the moshiach, to the exclusion of the kohen moshiach. He's a special kind of person. Me'ama Oretz prat the nasi, also to the exclusion of the king. Neither the kohen moshiach nor the king bring regular korban chatases. Of course, the kohen moshiach brings the par kohen moshiach, and the king brings the sa'ir nasi. Valekvarn yatsu moshiach lidon bepar nasi lidon besa'ir, or the fact that Gemara, why do we need this? Yeah, we already know this. The kohen moshiach already has his psukim, a whole section of the Torah that, small section, but several psukim in the Torah that describe the par kohen moshiach. We have several psukim in the Torah that describe the sa'ir nasi. Yeah, of course we know that the kohen moshiach has his own par. The nasi has his own sa'ir. They don't bring the regular korban chatas. Why do we need to exclude them from regular korban chatas? I mean, we know what they do. And it's not the korban chatas. Well, because sheyachol moshiach al helim dover shigigas ma'ase mevi par al shigigas ma'ase d'chuda mevi kisbo siro. Well, I may have had the opportunity to say, because as we know, of course, by the par kohen moshiach, it's only by helim doverim shigigas ma'ase. As we know, it's a little bit of a tricky sugya, a little bit of a mouthful. But as we know, the kohen moshiach only brings a par kohen moshiach for helem dover im shigigas maise. I would have had a minute to say that for shigigas maise alone, let's say something like he thought it was shuman, but he ended up being cheleb by accident. Maybe he would bring a regular korban chatos. Tamalomer me'ama oretz prat l'moshiach, me'ama oretz prat l'nasi. So therefore, when the pasuk says me'ama oretz, it is to exclude kohen moshiach. It's to exclude the nasi. So therefore, don't have that happening. Don't think that when it's shigigas maisa alone, the kohen moshiach brings a regular korban chatas. No, he brings a regular nothing. That if it's helim dovrim shigigas maisa, the kohen moshiach brings a par kohen moshiach. When it's shigigas maisa alone, he brings a nothing. A undefined, a non-existent, a let's go weiter. Tenach Mashiach. Okay, so this is all fine and good for Mashiach, kohen Mashiach, right? that that since he requires hel and dovrim shigigas ma'aseh, what about shigigas ma'aseh alone? Okay, so we have amaretz. Now el nasi b'shigigas ma'aseh hu demaisi, but when it comes to a king, he brings his sa'ir nasi both. Well, he brings his kohen is sa'ir nasi even for simply shigigas ma'aseh. So what in what context would I have had the havamina to say that a nasi should bring a regular korban chatas that I need to exclude him from a regular korban chatas? And here we're talking about kigon she'ochel kizayis chelev kishehu hedjit. Okay, well, if the king eats a kizayis of chelev when he's just a regular guy, v'nismane, and then he becomes king, okay, and then afterwards he finds out about it. Now, according to the Chachamim, it doesn't matter. You just bring a regular korban chatas. That's the halacha. But according to Reb Shemen, he doesn't bring anything in that case, right? So I may have thought to say nasi kisba usira kamash mulan. So I may have thought to say that he should bring a kisba usira kamash mulan. So hanichal Reb Shemen does about yidia. Elabon does about no. Who wants to explain this to us? Meaning, okay, so what's what's going on? We're trying to figure out when the pasuk says by korban chatos, me'am ha'aretz, to the exclusion, right? Me'am ha'aretz excludes a nasi, a king. I would have had some havamina to say that he should bring a kispe usir. No, me'am ha'aretz excludes the king. What is this context? So we wanted to say, well, what if he ate a kazai? I think the example we gave was the kazayis of chelib, right? Yeah, of course, classic korban chatas example. So you have a nasi, and you have somebody, a regular guy at this point, who eats a kazayis of chelib, and then he becomes the nasi. Now, according to Reb Shemen, so one second, so he ate a kazayis of chelib, didn't realize at the time, that's important, then he becomes the king. And then he realizes, nafal lo ha'asimon, he has a light bulb moment. He says, wait a minute, I ate chelev before I was king. So now, according to Reb Shemen, since he only realized once he was already king, he doesn't bring any korban at all. Now this is where I would have had the havamina to say that maybe he should bring a regular korban chatos in this case. So kamash malon me'am ha'aretz, to exclude a king, he brings nothing. So now what the Gemara is about to say is that this makes sense according to Reb Shemen, who says that when he realizes once he's already the king, he doesn't bring any korban. Okay, so maybe I'd have mina they should know he doesn't. But according to the Chachamim, Hitaka does bring a regular korban chatas. According to the Chachamim, this was our Mishnah, right? Is this still our Mishnah? I believe so. According to the Chachamim, if a person sins, and then they become king, they bring a regular korban chatas, like at the time that he sinned, even if he realizes later. According to the Chachamim, don't make a distinction like that. So if that's the case, Hitaka does bring a regular korban chatas. So then what's he being excluded from? What do you think of the question? So again, Amar of Zvid says, Zvid Mishmei what we need, Me'am ha'aretz, to exclude the king for is he ate a kazayis of chelev when he was just a regular guy. And then he becomes king, and only at that point, once he's king, does he realize, no, I ate chelev when I was just a regular guy. Now, according to Reb Shemen, he doesn't bring anything in this case, because he only realized once he was ready to king. So I may have thought to say, nasi kispo zero. Maybe he shouldn't bring nothing. Maybe he should bring just a regular korban chatos. Kamash malon. It says me'am ha'aretz. No, don't bring nothing. Don't bring anything. Hanichal Reb Shemen. Okay, so this is all fine and good according to Reb Shemen, who says you don't bring anything in that case. Dazul Basu Yediyah, who goes based on knowledge, and he only found out about it once he was king, and at that point he's not going to be bringing a korban chatos because he's already king. Kings don't bring korban chatoses, and therefore he brings nothing. El Rabbanon, The Azlu Basa Chataya, Michael Mima. But according to the Chacham, they taka do go based on the time that he sinned when he was just a regular guy, and he would actually bring just a regular Korban Chatas. So then, what is the king excluded from when it comes to Korban Chatas? Ela Amar of Zvid Mishmei Derave rather actually says of Zvid Mishmei Derave. Hachab Ma'iskin, and here what are we talking about? Kigon she'achol chatzi kazayis chelev kishehu hedjit. Okay, he ate half of a zayis of chelev when he was a hedjit. Vinismane, and then it sounds like mid-meal. They come into the restaurant and they say, "You are now the king." He already ate half a kazayis. He's about to put another half a zayis down the hatch. And they say, "You are now king." And then he takes his next bite. Menismane, and he becomes king. Vishlimo, and he has the other half of the kazayis. And the Goza Tuna points out, Bichdei achilas pras, right? Kilu. This is all happening very quickly, right? He has to eat a kazayis b'chdei achilas pras, as we've learned. When did we see this recently? Was that in Avodah Zarah? Was that here in Masechta Horayos? I can't even remember where we talked about k'dei achilas pras. Probably Masechta Avodah Zarah, but I can't remember. But anyways, it has to be eaten. Let's say, within a few minutes, you have to eat a kazayis. Anyways, so he eats half a kazayis. They come in, they tell him that, "Oh, you're now the king. Enjoy being king." Although, we learned already, right? Yeah, that was yesterday's daf, right? The king is hard work. You're a public servant. Al koponim. So, and then he finishes consuming the kazayis now that he is king. And then he finds out that, oops, you just ate chelev actually. So, Sagdatich Amina may have thought, Nitztaref v'naisikis b'osir. So maybe, according to the Chachamim, we would say that the two half zayises should join together, and he should bring a kiss bosira. Kamash Blan, it says me'ama aretz, to exclude the king in this very gripping example. So Rav asks Rav Nachman Nesius Mausha Tafsik. Interesting. Can being a king make a hefsik? What does that mean? Hey Chidami, tell me more. She'ochel chatzi kazayis chelev kishu hedjit v'nismane v'over v'shlimo. Chavi, you hear this? Things are really happening very fast. Pashit, he's sitting down to dinner. He's got a nice plate of fat. And, of course, he thinks that it's shuman. And he takes a bite, half a zayis. And they come in. They say, "Hail to the king," or whatever they say. You're now king, oh king. And he's like, "Oh, wow, thanks." And before he has an opportunity to have his second bite of fat, they say, "Oops, just kidding. Not anymore. Someone else is king now." And then he takes his second bite. So if they would have just left him alone, milichatchila, nobody would have said king, not king, whatever. He would have had one bite. He would have had a second bite. He would have eaten a kazayis of chelev by accident. He would have to bring a korban chatas. But here, he took the first bite. Some guy comes in and says, "You're king." Wait, you're not king. And then he takes a second bite. So, how do we view that? On the one hand, technically you can argue it isn't really much different than the case where nobody came in to say king, not king at all. He basically, as a regular person, he took two bites. One bite, a second bite, regular person for both bites. He should be chayiv to bring a korban chatas. At the same time, there was this whole king, not king thing in between. So, how do we relate to this? Okay. This says the Gemara again. Rav asked Rav Nachman, Nesius Moshe Tafsik. Would being king make a hefsek within just a few minutes? Because again, remember the kazayis has to be within k'dei achilas process, which is just a few minutes. He takes he eats a half a zayis of fat, forbidden fat, kishu hedgit, when he's a regular guy, v'nismane v'ovar, and then all within mamish, like 2 minutes, he becomes king, becomes unthroned, v'ovar, okay, nismane v'ovar, v'shlimo, and then he eats the rest of the kazayis of chelep. In the previous example, where he ate half the kazayis when he was a hedget, and then the second half of kazayis he ate when he was already king. So he was half the zayis he was a regular guy, half the kazayis he was the king. But over here, didi v'idi kshu hedget ochle mitzdarif. But in this case, where he was, at the end of the day, for the entire eating of the kazayis, he was a hedget. He was a hedget when he ate the first half. He was a hedget when he ate the second half. So maybe they could join together, and he would have to bring a korban chata. So dilma lo yishna mai. Or maybe the hefsek is still a hefsek. It's considered like 2 half zayises rather than a whole zayis. Chev, what do you think? Chev, what do you think of the question? Let's answer from the following. The Omar Ula Amar B'Yechanan says Ula in the name of B'Yechanan. Ochel chelev, if a person eats forbidden fat, v'hifrish korban, and he sets aside a korban. Okay, so he accidentally ate chelev. All right, so now he's going to bring a korban. So he set aside a korban to bring. V'heimir, and then he decided, you know what? The heck with this. I'm going to be a Moomar. I don't care about halacha. I don't care about anything. So a Moomar doesn't bring korban chatasis. Korban chatasis requires some level of remorse for having done an avera. But if you're a Moomar, you don't care about averas. So you're not going to. So there's no korban chatasis for Moomars. But then he did tshuva. Oh, Baruch Hashem. He went to Uman for Rosh Hashanah, and he came back a changed man. So hoyel v'nidche yidoche. So we say, well, when he became a Moomar, the korban was suspended, and it's suspended forever, right? So we say that initially he ate the chela by accident, and he set aside the korban chatas. But when he became a Moomar, the chatas was basically suspended, and it was suspended now forever. And now that he does tshuva, he's not going to bring that korban. So we want to say the same thing here. When he becomes king, right? He eats half a kazayis of chelev, then he becomes king. Well, that kind of like throws things off, and they'll never be thrown back on. Moomar lav bar asuye korbanu, hi bar asuye korbanu. But the Gemara says, that isn't really. We can't really draw conclusions from that situation with the Moomar, because a Moomar is bichlal, a person who is not shaykh to the concept of korbanos. Moomars don't bring, it's not a person who brings korbanos, but a king is a person who brings korbanos, a different korbanos than regular people, but it's a person who brings korbanos. So maybe we would not necessarily say that it was pushed off forever. And maybe if he eats half his eyes, becomes king, becomes unking, eats the second half of a kazayis, maybe taka should be mistarb. Sounds like we don't taka answer. Ba mineg, Ribzer asks a kasha from Rav Sheshes. Ochel sofik chelev kshu hedget. Okay, he's a regular guy, and he thinks he's eating shuman. Turns out he might have eaten chelev. We don't know. So for a regular guy, he would bring an oshim tolu. Because he doesn't know if he ate chelev or not. So he brings an oshim tolu. So sofik chelev kshu hedget, when he was a regular guy, he ate sofik chelev. V'nismana, now he becomes king. V'nodalo asfeiko, and now he finds out, as the king, he finds out, you might have eaten chelev when you're a regular guy. Ma, what's the halacha? Okay, according to the rabbis who say that it goes based on the time that he sinned, so of course he's going to bring an oshim tolu. At the time that he sinned, he was a regular guy. Regular guys bring oshim tolus. regular guys bring asham talis. So therefore, of course, he's going to bring an asham tali. But this is according to Reb Shemen. Because Reb Shemen doesn't go based on the time that he sins, he goes based on the time that he found out. And if he finds out, right, we said by korban chatas, if he ate chelev, and if he found out before he became king, so he brings the korban chatas. If he finds out once he's king, so Reb Shemen says he doesn't bring any korban at all. Now, so the question is now what happens in terms of the ashram tali? See, the thing is, when it comes to a korban chatas, so if we take the king, for example, when he is a regular guy, he brings a korban chatas, and when he's a king, he brings in ashram tali. Reb Shemen says that if he finds out when he's the king, he's not going... Did I say ashram tali? I'm sorry. When he's the king, he brings a sa'ir nasi. And Reb Shemen says, okay, so when it comes to the korban chatas, here we have a nasi. When he's a regular guy, he brings a korban chatas. Now that he's the nasi, he brings a sa'ir nasi. If he finds out that he ate chelev once he's a nasi, and now he's the nasi, and he has different korbanis when it comes to being a nasi, so the Reb Shemen says, look, he found out now that he's nasi, he brings nothing. So do we say that, well, from the fact that he changed with regard to vadai chelev, right, korban chatas / sa'ir nasi, ishtani the suffix, so the same thing, we'll say the same thing by a suffix, and he won't bring anything at all. Right, meaning just like if he finds out that he definitely ate chelev when he's the nasi, he doesn't bring anything at all. So same thing now by the ashram tali. Or dilma, or do we say, ki ishtani levadai de ishtani lekorban didei. Malacha delo ishtani lekorban didei. Im laisi ashram tali. Take. But when it comes to a nasi, for example, so a nasi brings in ashram tali. So the korban is the same, right? When he was a regular guy, he brings in ashram tali. When he's a nasi, he brings in ashram tali. So maybe we'll say that since the korban is the same, Reb Shemen would not say the same thing, right? Meaning Reb Shemen's shita was that if he finds out once he's the nasi, he brings no korban. So what happens by ashram tali? He finds out now that he's the nasi that maybe he ate chelev. So do we say, like we say by chatas, that he would bring nothing at all? Or maybe here, since it's the same ashram tali, whether he's a regular guy, whether he's the king, maybe when he finds out, now that he might have eaten chelev, now that he's the nasi, he finds this out. Maybe Reb Shemen would say that Itaka does bring an ashram tali. So we say, Teku, let's go weiter. Did you get the kasha? Right? Because Reb Shemen has this interesting shita, right? Which is when it comes to korban chatas, right? Of course, when it comes to regular korban chatas, the nasi brings a different korban than a regular person. A regular person brings a korban chatas, sira, kispa v'sira. A nasi brings a different korban, a sa'ir nasi. And in that case, Reb Shemen says that if he ate chelev by accident when he was a regular guy, but only found out about it now that he's a nasi, so he brings nothing. But maybe that's specifically by the chatas kind of situation, the vadai situation, when there's different korbanis, and he ate it when he was a regular guy, but now he's a nasi, and a nasi brings a different korban, and he only found out when he's a nasi, but based on what he did beforehand, different korbanis, and finding out, and then doing then, and now finding out now, and Reb Shemen says do nothing. But maybe when it comes to an ashram tali, when maybe he ate chelev, now a nasi brings in ashram tali, and the ashram tali is going to be the same, whether he is a regular guy, whether he's a nasi. So maybe the fact that he's a nasi shouldn't make a difference. Maybe Reb Shemen would say, even though he's finding out now as a nasi, maybe he would still bring an ashram tali. So we say teku, we say, let's go weiter. Okay, now we get up to the next part of today's daf, next little section that discusses Moomar, not exclusively Moomar, but it's a big part of the discussions over here. A Moomar, of course, being a person who doesn't care too much about halacha. Now, there's actually going to be two types of Moomars, right? There's Moomar ochel. In our case, we'll be talking about chelev l'teyav, right? Moomar ochel chelev l'teyav. And what does that mean? It means that he eats chelev not because he hates Hashem, God forbid, But because he's hungry, he likes chaylev, he's hungry. Meaning, if there was shuman, if he had a piece of shuman in front of him and he had a piece of chaylev, of course he would eat the shuman. He's not going to go out of his way to eat chaylev. But if this is what there is, there's only chaylev, there's no shuman, so we'll eat the chaylev. You can't resist. If there's another option, he'll take the kosher option. But otherwise, he'll have the non-kosher option. That's Moomar ochel. The phrase is generally Moomar ochel nevelis te'oven, but in our case, we're talking about chaylev. The other one is lahachis, which means that even if there was chaylev and shuman in front of him, right? There was a shuman option. He's going to go for the chaylev just to stick it. So that's Moomar ochel, in our case, chaylev lehachis. And so we're gonna discuss that, not necessarily immediately, but we are going to be discussing this sugya of Moomar. So now, Tana Rabbon, the rabbis taught me'am ha'oretz. So it says by korban chatas, of course, me'am ha'oretz prat leMoomar. Okay, to the exclusion of a Moomar. Moomars don't bring korban chatases. Reb Shemen bar Yossi Omer mishum Reb Shemen asher lo te'aseno bishgoge ve'oshem Hashov b'yediyoso maybe korban al shigagoso, lo shav b'yediyoso eno maybe korban al shigagoso. We saw this recently. Where did we see this? Shavuos? What? No. Did we not see this recently? Why is it telling me only in Shavuos? Did we not see this recently? Yeah, of course we saw this recently. Why are we not quoting this? I remember it was Daf Gimel Amud Aleph or something. Possibly. Maybe even Daf Beis Amud Aleph? Yeah, here it is, Daf Beis Amud Aleph. Why is the Mesorah Sashas not telling us Daf Beis Amud Aleph? Anyways, so it says Shemen bar Yossi, Hashav b'yediyoso, meaning when can you bring a korban chatas? You can bring a korban chatas in a scenario where you don't realize, and if you would be told, hey, that's chaylev, so you would stop, right? So if a person is about to eat chaylev, you say, hey, that's chaylev. And he says, oh, thanks for letting me know. And he stops. He doesn't eat the chaylev. So then, in the event that he did accidentally eat the chaylev, he could bring a korban chatas. A person who, if he would have known, wouldn't have eaten it, so he could bring a korban chatas. But if you would say, hey, that's chaylev, and he says, well, there's nothing else to eat, and he eats it, well, in that case, he would not bring a korban chatas. Again, Ashab b'yediyoso, maybe korban al shigagoso, a person who, if he had the knowledge, if he knew that it was chaylev, he would have stopped. He would have not done it. So maybe korban al shigagoso, so he could bring a korban chatas. Lo shavidi also, but if even when he is made known that it's chaylev, he doesn't care, it's not going to stop him. Maybe korban al shigagoso, he would not bring he does not bring up korban chatas. My benai, what's the difference between the Tanakama who says Moomars don't bring korban chatases versus Shemen bar Yossi who says Eino shav b'yediyosos don't bring korban chatases? Amar Rav Nuna, Moomar lechol chaylev umevi korban al adam ika benai. That's an interesting scenario. A person who, chaylev, he can't resist. Chaylev, he'll eat, right? You say, hey, that's chaylev. He's going to eat it anyways. He likes chaylev. He likes fat. But blood, on the other hand, he doesn't have a taiva for blood. He's not going to eat blood. If you say to him, hey, that's blood, he says, really? Yuck, I don't want to eat blood. I thought that was, I don't know, what was it, friends? I don't know. Something red and tasty. Thanks for letting me know it's blood. I had no interest in eating blood. So, if you have a person who would eat chaylev, but wouldn't eat blood and accidentally ate blood. So in terms of like blood, if you would have told him that it's blood, he wouldn't have eaten it. But if we were not talking about blood, if we're talking about chaylev, he wouldn't have cared. So according to Tanakama, who says that Moomars don't bring korban chatas, well, he's a Moomar. He's a Moomar vis-a-vis chaylev, right? If you told him, hey, you're eating chaylev, he says, whatever, I don't really care, and he eats it anyways. So the Tanakam would say, that's a Moomar, even though we're not talking about chaylev right now, we're talking about he ate blood by accident. Doesn't matter. He's a Moomar. Therefore, he doesn't bring korban chatas. Whereas Reb Shemen Bar Yossi would say, look, if you would have told him you're eating blood, he would have said, oh, I don't want to eat blood. So therefore, he's considered Shav Midiyaso, and he can bring a korban chatas. So yeah, my benai was an afkamine. Amar Vamnuna Moomar leochel chaylev. If he's a Moomar in terms of chaylev, if you would say, hey, don't eat it, it's chaylev, he says, I don't care. However, if you would say, hey, don't eat it, it's blood, he'd say, yuck, okay, I'm not going to eat blood. Umevi korban al adam. The question is, if he accidentally ate blood, can he bring a korban for blood? Marsa came in the Moomar lechol chaylev the dam nami Moomar have. So Tanakam would say, look, a Moomar is a Moomar is a Moomar. If he's a Moomar for chaylev, even vis-a-vis dam, he'll be considered a Moomar. He can't bring a korban chatas. Umar Sover, whereas Reb Shemen Bar Yossi holds, Ledam Mia Shav Midiyaso. Who? That, look, vis-a-vis blood, if you would have told him, if you would have known that it was blood, he would not have eaten it. So he can bring a korban chatas for having eaten blood by accident. Rava Omer says, Rava, Dechule alma Moomar lechol chaylev lo avi Moomar ledam. So it says, Rava, actually, everyone agrees that we could isolate the two scenarios. Even if you were to say to him, hey, that's chaylev, don't eat it, he would have eaten it. But in the context of blood, if you say, hey, that's blood, he would say, oh, okay, I have no interest. I'm not. Thanks for letting me know, I don't want to eat the blood. So, in terms of blood, we would not refer to him as a Moomar. Right? Just because he would eat chaylev, but he wouldn't eat the dam, and therefore he's not a Moomar in the context of blood. Okay, so what's the difference between the Tanakam and Reb Shemen Bar Yossi? So here it says nevela, but there's a different case that says chaylev, and that just works better in our context, so I'm going to go with that. So halacha ba'ochel chaylev l'te'avon v'nischalev lo chaylev b'shumon ve'achalo k'miflageh. So here we're talking about a person who eats chaylev l'te'avon. He eats chaylev when he'll eat chaylev if there's no shumon. Because if there's no shuman around, okay, so he'll eat the chaylev. If there's shuman, he'll eat the shuman. He won't eat the chaylev. And here what happened was, he thought he was taki eating shuman, right? Now he preferred to eat shuman. He doesn't want to eat chaylev for the sake of eating chaylev. He's the kind of guy that, like, look, if there's only chaylev, okay, whatever, he's not going to be so makbid, he'll eat the chaylev. But he definitely preferred to do the right thing. He preferred to eat the shuman. And here he was. They're like, oh, here's some fat. He was under the impression it was shuman. He's like, okay, great. Nice. There's shuman here. Great. I'm happy that the shuman, and he eats the shuman. Turns out it was chaylev. And he's like, oh, chabal. I actually thought I was doing I wanted to do the right thing. I thought I was doing the right thing. I feel a little bad that it ends up being chaylev. Right? That it ended up being chaylev. So if you say he's a Moomar, if you're a Tanakam, you say, look, at the end of the day, he's a Moomar. Keilu. At the end of the day, he's a Moomar because he's the type of person that if there was only chaylev around, he would eat it. Therefore, he's a Moomar. Therefore, he can't bring a korban chatas. But according to Reb Shemen Bar Yossi, he says, look, I mean, he preferred to eat the shuman. He thought he was eating shuman. He feels bad that he ate chaylev. He didn't want to eat chaylev. He thought he was eating shuman, so he could bring a korban chatas for it. My sover came to the te'avon ochil b'mezid Moomaru. The Tanakama says, look, if all there was available was chaylev, he would eat chaylev knowingly. Therefore, he can't bring a korban chatas. Umasava came to ilu ashkach de teira lo achol d'yisur. Whereas Reb Shemen Bar Yossi says, look, in the event that if there's chaylev and shuman, he would not eat the chaylev. He would eat he would eat the shuman. And here he thought he was eating shuman. So la mumaru, we would not consider him to be a Moomar, rather we would consider him to be Shav Midiyaso, and therefore he could bring a korban chatas. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Ochel chaylev zeo Moomar. Okay, if a person eats chaylev, he is a Moomar. Bezu Moomar, and who is a Moomar? I know it's weird, right? We just said a person who eats chaylev is a Moomar, and then we said, who is a Moomar? We just said a person who eats chaylev. But anyways, Vezu Moomar, who is a Moomar? Acho nevelis, a person eats nevela, v'trefis, shkotzim or amasim, v'shasi yein nesech, or drinks yein nesech. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, af alovish kilayim, Rabbi Yehuda says even somebody who wears kilayim, shatnes. Omer, we said, Ochel chelev, zeo Moomar. We said, if a person eats chelev, that's a Moomar. Ve'ezu Moomar, and who's a Moomar? Ochel nevelis v'chulei, my comment, what's going on? I don't understand. We just said, a Moomar is somebody who eats chelev, and all of a sudden we're saying, what's a Moomar? A Moomar is somebody who eats nevelis, trefis. What happened to the chelev definition? So, Omer Rabbi Babachanam Abirchon Ochi Komer, this is pshat. Ochel chelev l'tei oven. If a person eats chelev l'tei oven, that he's only eating chelev because there's no shuman around. But if there was shuman around, he'd prefer to eat that. He would eat that. Harei ze Moomar. Okay, so that's what's referred to a Moomar. Now, lehachis harei ze tztuki. This is what I mentioned a few minutes earlier, that there is we're going to see some machlokas, but according to this brisa, what we're saying is that if a person does it lahachis, kilu, even if there was shuman around, he would still eat the chelev because he just doesn't care about mitzvahs, doesn't care that it's also, doesn't care that he's chayiv kares. So that's not a Moomar, that's a tztuki. A Moomar is Moomar ochel l'teyavim. Moomar is somebody that if there's no shuman around, he'll eat the chelev. But if there's shuman around, he'll eat the shuman. Somebody who, even when there's shuman around, will still eat the chelev, that is not a Moomar, that is a tztuki. Ve'ezu Moomar de b'stomo tztuki. What's an example of this kind of a Moomar who we just assume by default is a tztuki? Have omer, ochel nevelo trefa shkotzim or mosim v'shasi nesech. That is somebody who eats disgusting things like nevelas and trefas. Kilu, why are you eating that stuff? I guess those things are considered things that you'd only eat if you just don't care. Because otherwise, I guess you'd rather eat stuff that's not a trefa. I don't know, who wants to eat like sick food? Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer says Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Afal of Kilayim, also somebody who wears kilayim. My benai, what's the difference between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, right? Meaning, interesting. Okay, here it says Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, earlier, or it said Rabbi Yehuda. But anyways, according to the Tanakama, right, he says somebody who eats nevelis, trefis, right, these are deoraisa things. Kilayim is also deoraisa. So like, what's the some of this Tanakama should also agree somebody wears kilayim would be in the same category. So my benai, what's the difference? Nikebenayu kilayim derabanan. The difference is kilayim derabanan. The Tanakama is only talking about deoraisa things. Ma'asav midoraisa avi Moomar derabanan lo avi Moomar. Tanakama says only deoraisa things. So kilayim deoraisa, he would be a Moomar for. And Ma'asav kilayim came to mefarsim isure. I feel b'derabanan avi Moomar. Whereas Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda says, look, when it comes to kilayim, since shatnez is a well-known thing, so then even if you wore shatnez derabanan, then it would still be considered a Moomar. One opinion is l'tei oven Moomar lachas tztuki. Also, one opinion is that if he eats chelev v'teyavon, just because there's no shuman around, so that's a Moomar. But if he would eat the chelev even when there is shuman around, well then that's not a Moomar anymore. That's next level. That's a tztuki. The other opinion is lahachis nami Moomar, that even if somebody eats chelev when there's shuman around, he is still a Moomar. He's not considered tztuki. And nafkamina is, I believe, I think where it came up in Masechta Avodah Zarah is if he's like, I think, would you even throw him into a pit or something? Right? There's like nafkaminas about how you relate to this person if he's a tztuki versus if he's a Moomar. So leizu tztuki. So wait, where am I? Where am I? Moomar lach is tztuki. B'chadam lach is nami Moomar. Okay. Okay, but then we ask the kasha though. We have a brayso that says eizu tztuki. Kol ha'over avodas kochavim. No. I'm sorry. Right. So according to this opinion, even if he eats chelev lahachis, he's still a Moomar. He's not a tztuki. So what's a tztuki? Somebody who does avoid the zar. But meisve with a kasha ochel pirish echad. A person who eats some kind of a insect, I believe, or yatush or a mosquito or a gnat or something. Echad. How is a Moomar? He's a Moomar. So interesting. Here we're referring to somebody who eats like disgusting things as a Moomar. Now, why would anybody eat a disgusting thing? You'd only eat something disgusting if you lahachis. So you wouldn't eat. Who has a taiva to eat mosquitoes? Clearly, if you're eating mosquitoes because it's lahachis, and still we're saying it's a Moomar. For ochad de lahachis, who it's certainly lahachis, who was a taiva to eat these things. And we're still calling them a Moomar, not a tztuki. So some nami etom tam de isur. No, there also you can argue that it isn't lehachis, right? That it isn't lehachis. You could say lehachis is not a Moomar; it's a tztuki. But what's going on in the case of the mosquito? Why are we referring to him as a Moomar? Because he wants it. I'm curious. What I have a desire to find out to experience the taste of a mosquito. I'm curious. So he has a taiva to taste a mosquito. It's not lahachis that he's eating mosquito just to get at God. He's curious what it tastes like, and he can't resist. That's why he referred to him as a Moomar. Vezu nasi is a melech. The Mishnah said, "Who's a nasi?" That's a king. Nasi yachol nasi shevet knachshe ben aminodov. Or maybe nasi just means like the nasim, the 12 nasim. Each shevet at a nasi. For example, shevet Yehuda nachshe ben aminodov. Tamnom mikol mitzvahs Hashem eleikov. That it says by the Sa'ir Nasi from all of the mitzvahs of Hashem eleikov l'olam l'omen. It says by a king, by the Sefer Torah of a king, l'man yilmod liyiras Hashem eleikov. Same lashon malol she'ein all. Al Gabav El Hashem Elikov, just like by the Sefer Torah, we're talking about a king, somebody who there is nobody above him other than the Rabban Shalom himself. So Av Nasi Shein Al Gabav El Hashem Elikov. So here also the Nasi that we're talking about 5, the Sa'ir Nasi is a king, somebody who there is not above him only, right? The only one above him is the Rabban Shalom. Only the Rabban Shalom tells him what to do. But Minei Rabbi Reb Chia, Rabbi asks Reb Chia, Kigon Oni, Mao B'Soyer. So Rabbi asks Reb Chia, if I lived in the time of the Beis Mikdash, now, I believe that his great-grandfather, right, his father was Shemen Gamliel, his grandfather was Rabbi Gamliel, his great-grandfather was the first of Shemen Gamliel, who I believe was the last nasi in the Beis HaMikdash, in the second temple. Now, Rabbi asks Reb Chia, he says, I'm the nasi, right? Rebbe was Rabbi Yehuda nasi. So Rebbe asks Rabbi Chia, if we had the Beis HaMikdash now, would I bring a Sa'ir nasi? Unless Rabbi Chia responded to Rebbe, Harei tzarascha beBabble. No, because your counterpart is in Babylonia. Meaning there was the Reish Gelusa in Babble. So if we say that in all of Ella, Hashem Eleikov, right, like a king, it's not really like that because you have the Reish Gelusa in Babel, you're not really the head honcho. Esvei, we have a contradiction. Malchei Yisrael, Malchei Beis David, the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah, Elim Mevim Latzman, Velim Mevim Latzman, they would each bring their own Sa'ir Nosis, I think is the point. Right? If the Melech Yehuda or the Melech Yisrael sinned by accident, right, they would each respectively bring Sa'ir Nasis. So why don't we say the same thing here by Rebbe in the Reish Gelusa Amalei, to which Reb Chia responds, Hossam over there, lo kaife adadli. Neither one was higher or subservient to the other. Hacha anan kaifina lahu, but actually we in Eretz Yisrael are subservient, are kind of, I don't know what the word is, but subservient in some ways, I guess. We're not the head honcho. They are in Babble. right? This was right. Rabbi Yochanan had this Gemara, I think in more than one place. The Rabbi Yochanan says in Bava Kama. I just looked it up recently. In Bava Kama, Daf Kuf Yud Zayin, I think Rabbi Yochanan says something like, right, Amri Dilanhu Dilhonhu or something. That basically Rabbi Yochanan initially thought that kind of Torah scholarship was in Eretz Yisrael, but then he realized that it was actually in Babble. Rabbi Yochanan, of course, was a little bit later than Rabbi, but anyways, so actually in Eretz Yisrael it was subservient to the authority in Babble. Like Babble was the main hub of authority, I guess, is the point. So on Kafir on the who, Lididu. If Safa taught it like this, Ba'amine, Rabbi asked Rabbi Kigon, Ani mal b'sari, would I bring a sa'ir nasi in the Beis Hamikdash? Amalei, Rabbi responded, Hasum shevet, achim l'chokek. Over there in Babble, the Reish Galusa is considered a stick, whereas over here we're considered sages, and a stick is more authoritative. D'Tanya lo yaser shevet mi Yehuda. When it says that the stick will not go from Judah, that is the Reish Galusa in Babble. Sheroda is Yisrael b'Makol, who rules over the Yidden with a stick. And a lawmaker. Elu b'nei banav shel Hillel. These are the descendants of Hillel, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was a descendant of Hillel, right? Hillel. He had a son Shemen, who had a son Rabbi Gamliel Azakin, Rabbi Shemen Gamliel, Rabbi. Shemlam Torah Yisrael Baravim, that they teach Torah to Israel in public. So we see, it sounds like the conclusion is that Rabbi would not have been in a position to offer a Sa'ir Nasi, since at that time there was the Reish Galusa that was considered more authoritative. Okay, now we get up to the next Mishnah, which talks about the Parkoy Moshiach and also kind of leads us to discussions about the Shemen Hamishkhah, which is really going to be the bulk of the discussion until the end of the daf. The Shemen Hamishkhah, the anointing oils, and we're going to talk more about that. Bezu Mashiach, says the Mishnah, who is this kohen moshiach that we have been talking about so much? So as we've discussed, there are two ways for a kohen gadol to become kohen gadol. One is with the anointing oil. They anoint him with the anointing oil, and that is how he becomes the kohen gadol. The other way is by putting on the 8 garments. A kohen gadol, right? I hope I didn't say king. A kohen gadol becomes a kohen gadol either with anointing oil or by simply putting on all of the 8 garments of the kohen gadol. Of course, a kohen hedjit wears 4 garments. Kohen gadol has 8 garments, so he puts on the 8 garments and starts doing the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. He is now the kohen gadol. So when we say be'ezu Mashiach hamashuach b'Shemen Hamishkhah lo amru b'begadim, when we're talking about the par kohen Mashiach, we're talking about a kohen gadol who was anointed with the anointing oils. Now, as we're going to learn about, I think we're going to get up to it. I think I want to get up to it at the end of the daf today, that Yoshio hid the Shemen Hamishkhah at the end of the first Beis Hamikdash, and from that point we don't have the Shemen Hamishkhah, which means that throughout the second Beis Hamikdash, all kohen gadol were meruba begadim kohen gadol, and we're saying that the par kohen Mashiach was specifically a Shemen Hamishkhah kohen gadol. Ein ben kohen Mashiach b'Shemen Hamishkhah meruba begadim. The only difference between a kohen gadol hamashuach b'Shemen Hamishkhah versus meruba begadim, ela par bal kol mitzvahs, is a part whether that is the par kohen Mashiach, that only a mashuach will bring a par kohen Mashiach, not the meruba begadim, and secondly also to do the avoda for a parlam davar shel tzibur, right? By parlam davar shel tzibur that we've been discussing so much. So whether it's the Sanhedrin, whether it's the Shvatim, whoever it is, they're going to bring these cows to the Beis Hamikdash, and a kohen is going to have to do the avoda. what was that sound? I hope it's not a siren or something. Let me just check. I don't think it is. I think it's just people making noise outside. Anyways, so a meruba begadim would not do the avoda, right? Would not bring a par kohen moshiach, and also would not do the service for the par l'ndavar shel tzibur in the Beis Hamikdash. The ein bein kohen meshamish, the kohen she'ovar. Okay, a active kohen gadol versus a past kohen gadol who is not currently active, right? Maybe he was a person, right? Maybe the kohen gadol was possible for a time, and therefore they had a replacement for a temporary replacement. Now the original kohen gadol was reinstated, so this the sort of temporary replacement who's no longer a kohen gadol is a kohen gadol she'ovar. So the only difference is ela par Yom Kippurim, the cow, the par and Iseh Bifnim that's offered on Yom Kippurim, that would have to be done by the kohen Hamishamish, the active kohen gadol, Vasir Seifa, as well as the minchas chavitin, which was a flour offering that the kohen gadol offered every day. That would be done by the kohen Hamishamish. But v'zev shabim ba'avodas Yom Kippurim, but the other services of Yom Kippur, offering other sacrifices on Yom Kippur would be permitted. Musubim al abesula, both the kohen Hamishamish as well as the kohen she'ovar, both must marry a besula. Vasur malo almona, may not marry almonas. Ve'enim mitam b'kroveim, do not become tamei to their immediate relatives. Kohen hedrotis can, but not kohen gadol, and we're saying also not kohen she'ovars. V'lo porim, v'lo formim, they don't grow out their hair when when a relative dies. V'lo formim, nor do they rend their garments. And also, as we learned about Masechta Makis, if a person kills another person inadvertently, so they have to flee to the Ir Miklat, and they stay there until the Kohen Gadol dies. Now that could be either the Kohen HaMishamish or the Kohen She'ovar. If either one dies, inadvertent killers go free. And now for the rest of the daf, we are going to discuss the Shemen Hamishkhah, the anointing oil. Shemen Hamishkhah, the anointing oil also Moshe Bamidbar that Moses made in the desert. So how would they make the Shemen Hamishkhah? Well, they would take different kinds of roots, whatever ingredients were in the Shemen Hamishkhah. So they would take those roots and they would boil them in oil. There would be olive oil, 12 logs of olive oil. They would take the roots and boil the roots in the olive oil, and the roots would infuse their fragrances and stuff into the olive oil. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Such is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi says, Rabbi Yossi, Balo lasuch es ha'ikarim eino sofek. 1 second, says Rabbi Yossi. The thing is, these roots are absorbent, and even if you would take the 12 logs of olive oil and merely rub the olive oil onto the roots would soak up the olive oil. There would be nothing left. You'd run out of olive oil. Certainly, there's not going to be enough to soak them and boil the roots in 12 logs of olive oil. Ella, rather suggests Rabbi Yossi, says Rabbi Yossi, what they would do is first they would soak the roots in water so that what they would absorb is water and not the oil. Once the roots have finished absorbing stuff, well now, umatzefal of shemen, now they can pour the oil on the roots and things, and the roots won't absorb the oil, they'll just infuse the oil with their fragrance. Vekolet esareach, the oil will be infused with the fragrance, vekapcho, and then he very quickly removes the oil, and he has this very fragrant, infused Shemen Hamishkhah. Amar lo Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says to Rabbi Yossi, what are you so concerned about, Rabbi Yossi? You're concerned that, physically speaking, you have like a very technical concern, like there's not going to be enough oil, it's going to get soaked up by the roots. Says Rabbi Yehuda, we're talking about the Shemen Hamishkhah here. This was a miraculous oil. V'chi nes echod nase b'Shemen Hamishkhah. V'alu tchilaso 12 login, says Rabbi Yehuda, what, do you think this was the only miracle that was happening with the Shemen Hamishkhah? The whole thing was miraculous. After all, it starts out with 12 logs of oil, and yet, nimshach mishkan v'chelav, with these 12 oils, somehow it was enough to anoint the Mishkan, all of its clay sharis, Aharon, uvan of kol shiva simei miluim, Aharon and his children, all of the 7 days leading up to of the Chanukah, of the Miluim, prior to the Chanukah Samizbeh, the 7 days up to Rosh Chodesh Nisan, when they inaugurated the Mishkan, v'chulo kaim lasalovo, and all of the Shemen Hamishkhah remains for the future. Shenemar Shemen Mishchas Kodesh yezeh li l'doraseichem, for all your generations. So says Rabbi Yehuda is not too concerned about the technical limitations of the 12 loaves and the spices and the roots and stuff. Says Rabbi Yehuda, it all just kind of worked out. Tanya Idach, we have another brisa. Vayikach Moshe as Shemen Hamishkhah vayimshach es Hamishkan. Moses took the anointing oils and anointed the tabernacle that's called Asher Bo and everything inside it. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda, Shemen Hamishkhah shasa Moshe, the anointing oil that Moses made by Midbar in the desert, Kama Nisim Naisuba. There were lots of miracles with this. This was miraculous oil. From from soup to nuts, from A to Z, from beginning to end. It began as merely 12 logs. Kama yore bolas. Now, if you think about it, we start out with just 12 logs of oil. I don't know how much 12 logs are, but it sounds like it's not like an infinite amount. It sounds like it's a limited amount. And if you think about it, the pot itself, when you heat up the oil, the pot itself is going to absorb some of that oil. And the roots are going to absorb some of that oil. Or soref, and some of it's going to get, I guess, disintegrated by the heat, by the fire. Mishkan and it uses the Shemen Hamishkhah to anoint the tabernacle and its vessels. Ve'aharin uvan of kol shiva simei miluim uvan of ke'anim gedolim u'malachim. And they used the Shemen Hamishkhah to anoint kohen gadol and kings. Vafilu kohen gadol ben kohen gadol ta'un mishicha. And even the kohen gadol, the son of a kohen gadol, needs to be anointed as well. Ve'ein moshchim melech ben melech. But we don't, however, anoint a king, the son of a king. So then why did they anoint Shlomo? Because Adoniyahu contested Shlomo for kingship. So because that was, I guess, a unique circumstance, a contested high stakes circumstance, that is why Shlomo was specifically anointed as the king. Yoash was the son of Achaziyahu. Anyways, I think his grandmother Asalia, I think Yoash's father was Achaziyahu, I think, and he was killed by Yehu. Achaziyahu was killed by Yehu along with Yoram. Anyways, I looked it up earlier. Interesting story. Anyways, Asalia was kind of all upset that her son was killed, and I don't know, she ended up wanting to kill like all potential heirs, including her grandson, Yoash. Anyways, he was like hidden away for a while. So anyways, because that was like a whole exceptional situation. So then he was anointed. Also, they anointed Yoachaz because Yoachaz, I believe, was the son of Yoshio. Because really, Yehoiakim was older than Yoachaz. So because Yehoiakim technically probably, in theory, it would go to the older son, but because it went to the younger son, Yoachaz, that's why they anointed him there. Yehoiakim was 2 years older than Yoachaz. The also Shemen kaim lo sedlavo, and that oil is for the future. Shenemar Shemen Hamishkhah Kodesh Zeh Lili Dorasechem Zeh Big Matzra Shneim Osaluganafu, and Zeh is the Big Matzra 12, representing the 12 logs of the Shemen Hamishkhah. Moomar, we said, Hafilu kohen gadol ben kohen gadol ton moshiach, that even a high priest, the son of a high priest, needs to be anointed with the anointing oils. The Chsiv, as the Apostle says, Kohen Hamishech tachtov mibonov, that the kohen who is anointed beneath him from his sons. Nema kra v'kohen mitachtov bonov, my hamoshiach. What does the Daf say? That is anointed, his son who is anointed. Kamashman de mibonov the kohen gadol Yahweh Mashiach, Ave Kohen Gadol ve'ilo, Ave Kohen Gadol, that you have to anoint the son of a Kohen Gadol in order for him to be Kohen Gadol. Moomar, we said, ve'ein moshchin melech ben melech minolan. We said that we don't anoint the king who is the son of a king. How do we know this? And then I think it says, hu uvanav. Right, who uvanav b'kerev Yisrael. So Yerusha ilochem, it's simply an inheritance that the son of the king will be king. You don't need any anointing. We say so. We gave three examples of Shlomo, Yoash, Yoachaz, that they were anointed because there was some kind of machlokes, so they had to take a step to anoint them as king. So how do we know that when there's a machlokes, you anoint? V'lav kol deboi malka mors machusa livnei. But didn't we just simply say that it would just be inherited from the son? So Amar Rav Papa Amar Kra hu uvanav b'kerev Yisrael. B'zman shalom b'Yisrael koinu be'uvanav. When there's peace among Israel and everything's just flowing, so then you don't need to anoint the son; he'll just inherit the position. Even without Mashiach. But when there isn't peace and harmony, well, then you might have to anoint the king, even if his father was the king. Tana, Yehu ben Nimshi leNimshach el mipnei machlukoso shel Yoram. And also, Yehu was anointed to be king because there was a machlekes with Yoram. Typically, mishum derishin hu. But why don't we simply say that Yehu was anointed because he was the first in his line? His father was not Kohen Gadol. It was not king. The Davidic kings are anointed. Malchei Yisrael ain't meshuchin, but the Malchei Yisrael were not anointed. Of course, there was in the days of Rechavam, the son of Shlomo. That is when there started to be two kings in Eretz Yisrael. There was the king of Yehuda and the king of Yisrael. So the Malchei Beis David, they would be anointed. The Malchei Yisrael would not be anointed. Minolan, how do we know this? The Apostle says, Kum moshcheyu ki zeh v'gomer, that it says when Shmuel anointed David, it says, go and anoint him ki. Was that, what does the Apostle say? Ki zehu, because this is him. Zeh ta'un Mashiach, right? Davidic kings require Mashiach, ve'in acher ta'un Mashiach. But others do not. Malchei Yisrael don't get anointed. Moomar, we said earlier, Af Yehu ben Nimshi lo nimshach ele mipnei machlukoso shel Yoram. We said that Yehu was only anointed because of the machlokes that he had with Yoram, but he was a Melech Yisrael. So mishum machlukoso shel Yoram ben Acha of Nimo b'Shemen. I don't understand. We said that only Malchei Beis David are anointed. Malchei Yisrael are not anointed. So then why are we saying that Yehu was anointed? I understand there's a machlokes with Yoram, but he's a Melech Yisrael. We can't anoint him with Shemen Hamishkhah. Kedamar Papa be afarsima dachya achinami b'afarsima dachya, as a Papa says, and this is what I would like to get to at the end of the daf today. But Papa says with pure balsam oil. It wasn't Shemen Hamishkhah, it was balsam oil. So that's what they anointed Yehu with, balsam oil, not with the Shemen Hamishkhah. So it said said that they anointed Yoachaz because he was not the oldest. His brother Yoakim was older than him. Was Yehoyakim really older than Yehoachaz? The pasuk says Uvnei Yoshio, the children of Yoshio. HaBechor, who is the Bechor? Yochanan. Hasheni, who is the second? Yehoyakim. Hashlishi, Tzidkiyahu, the third was Tzidkiyahu Varvi, and the fourth was Shalom. Yochanan says who Shalom with Tzidkiyahu. So Yochanan, Shalom and Tzidkiyahu are the same person. We're going to ask in a minute, but wait, it says that Tzidkiyahu was 3, Shalom was 4. How could they be the same person? We'll get there in a minute. Who Yochanan, who Yoachaz, that Yochanan is Yoachaz. And the pasuk says, we're going to read again, Uvnei Yoshio, Abechor Yochanan, Hasheni Yoyakim, says the Bechor was Yochanan. We're saying that Yochanan is Yoachaz. So we're saying Yoachaz was actually the Bechor. So why are we saying that that Yoyakim was older than Yoachaz? Sounds like Yoachaz was older than Yoyakim. So the Olam Yoyakim Kashish. No, look, really Yoyakim was older than Yoachaz. Right? That's his name? Yeah. These are confusing. My Bechor the Malchus, when it says that Yoachaz was the Bechor, not because he was older than Yehoyakim, but because he was the first to be king. But can younger sons king before older? It says that the kingship was given to Yehoram because he was the Bechor. Yehoram mimale mokum avosav hava Yoyakim la mimale avosav hava. Yeah, but Yehoram was fit to continue in his father's ways. He was doing the right thing, whereas Yoyakim was not. Therefore, it was given to Yehoachaz. The kingship was given to Yoachaz. We said who Shalom and Tzidkiyahu, that Shalom and Tzidkiyahu are the same person. Who Yochanan, who Yoachaz, and Yochanan and Yoachaz are the same person. How could Tzidkiyahu and Shalom be the same person if it says that Tzidkiyahu was 3 and Shalom was 4? The third and the fourth. My shlishi lebanim. Well, Tzidkiyahu and Shalom are the same person. When it says third, it means he was the third of the children. My Revi lemalchus, and fourth, it means he was the fourth to be king. De Meikara Malach Yoachaz. First was Yoachaz, Levasof Yoyakim, and then Yoyakim Levasof Yechonya. Yechonya was, I believe, the son of Yoyakim, Levasof Tzidkiyahu, and then Tzidkiyahu. Tanarbanan. The Rabbi said, "Who Shalom with Tzidkiyahu? V'lomenika Shmo Shalom." Shalom and Tzidkiyahu are the same person. Why is it called Shalom? Shaya Meshulam b'Maisav. Because his actions were good. That's interesting. Because I think that it says in the Navi that I think it says that he didn't do such good stuff. Anyways, and we had learned the other day about people who were doing Avodah Zarah during Tzidkiyahu, right? That was the whole thing, that they wanted to bring a Korban Chatas for the Avodah Zarah that they served during Tzidkiyahu. If you remember that from the other day. Shalom Shesholma Malchus Bezdav B'Yamav, and some say Shalom. Tzidkiyahu was called Shalom because that was the end of the Malchus Beis David, right? That there was the Galus Yehoyarim, but was that it? Yehoyakim, the Galus Yehoyakim, and then Yechonya, and then Tzidkiyahu became king, and then they exiled. No, they killed him, right? I think. And then that was kind of the end of the Malchus Beis David with Nebuchadnezzar. Tanarbanu Shalom Utzidkiyahu. No, we just heard that. Umashmo, what's his real name? Matanya Shmo. His name is Matanya. Shnem Vayimloch Melech Babble as Matan Vayamlech. What's this? Vayamlech Melech Babble as Matanya Dodo. Yechonya's uncle Matanya. Tachtov Vayesev es Shmo Tzidkiyahu, and he called him Vayasev es Shmo Tzidkiyahu, and Nebuchadnezzar called Matanya Tzidkiyahu. Amalei says to him, Yatzdik alecha es adin im timor bi. If you rebel against me, may God I guess, get you in trouble. Rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar. Now, how could it be that there was Shemen Hamishkhah to anoint Yehoachaz? Yehoachaz was the son of Yoshio. Yoshio hid away the Shemen Hamishkhah. We learn about Mishenignos Aaron, when the Holy Ark was hidden away, Nignas Shemen Hamishkhah, along with the Holy Ark, the anointing oil was hidden away. Vitzinsenes Hamon, and the little container with manna in it. And the staff of Aaron with its almond blossoms and flowers from with the whole Korach fiasco. And the box in which the Philistines sent a gift to the Yidden, to the God, to the Rabbanu Shalom Shenemar, Vesklei Azov, Ashivosem lo Oshom, Tasimu be'argaz mitzido v'shilachtem oso v'aloch. That they said, and take these gifts and put them in a box and send them together with the Aaron. Umi ganozo Yishayo melech Yehuda ganozo. That Yoshio melech Yehuda ganozo. Yoshio hid these items, including the Shemen Hamishkhah shero shkosu b'Torah, because he saw that it says in the Torah, Yolech Hashem oscha v'ez malcha v'gomer, that the Rabbanu Shalom is going to send away all the Yidden. So Tziva v'Gonzum, so Yoshio decreed that all these things, these items should be hidden away. Shenemar's Bazos Vayomer LaLevim, that Yoshio says to the Levites, Hamavinim l'chol Yisrael, Akadoshim LaHashem, who kind of teach to the Yidden and they're holy to God. Tnuas Aaron HaKodesh Baboyis, place the Holy Ark in the house, meaning to hide it away. Hashabana Shlomo ben David Melech Yisrael, Ein lechem asa b'kosef, Ata ivdu es Hashem lekechem v'es am Yisrael. Basically, that's the pasuk where Yoshio is telling the Levim to hide away the Aaron v'omer ba'ila asya sham, that it says sham by the Aaron, and it also says sham by the, it says, where am I? Sham by the Aaron, and it also says, Shama by the, it's in Senes Hamon. So it says Sham by the Aaron, it says Sham by the Mon. So meaning just like the Aaron was hidden away, so was the Senes Hamon. Asi Mishmeres, also by the Mon, it says Mishmeres, as well as by the staff of Aaron, it says Mishmeres. So that's how we know that the Mishmeres was also hidden, that the staff was also hidden away. Also Doris, and again it says Doris by Mon, and it says Doris by the, I believe, Shemen Hamishkhah. Yeah, by the Shemen Hamishkhah. So that's how we know that the Shemen Hamishkhah was also hidden away. No. So back to the question, how could it be that Yehoachaz was anointed with the Shemen Hamishkhah if his father Yoshio had already stashed it away, had hidden away forever? As we saw earlier, Papa says it was with pure balsam oil. So he was not anointed with the Shemen Hamishkhah, he was anointed with balsam oil. Chevre, that was Daf Yud Aleph of Masechta Horayos. Chevre, on Daf Yud Aleph of Masechta Horayos, we learned more details about the part kohen moshiach and Sarah Nasi. We learned that from Am Haaretz, Prat le Kohen Gadol, Prat le Nasi. Why did we have to exclude them? They already have their own psukim, and we had that whole discussion. We got a bit. There was a chunk there about Moomars, which is, I think, always an interesting little sugya there. So there were two opinions. One opinion is that a Moomar l'teyavon. So, for example, if there's chelev and so if there's chelev and shuman, he'll eat the shuman. But if there's no shuman around, then he'll eat the chelev. So that's a mumar l'teyavon. But if he does it l'hachis, if he does it in spite of God, that's not a mumar. That is a stuki. The other opinion is that also whether a mumar l'teyavon, whether a mumar l'hachis, they're both considered mumars. And then we got to the next Mishnah where we said that the kohen gadol that we're talking about is dafka kohen hamoshiach b'shemen kohen gadol moshiach b'shemen hamishkhah, not a muba begadim, which then led to a whole discussion about the Shemen Hamishkhah, which I think is pretty interesting, how to prepare the Shemen Hamishkhah, who got anointed with the Shemen Hamishkhah, and then we are going to continue that discussion into tomorrow. Chevre, peace.